Mistress thought she found a rich billionaire until she discovered it was the wife's perfect revenge. They say secrets always find their way to the surface, no matter how carefully they're buried. In this story of glamour, ambition, and betrayal, Emily Carter believed she'd landed the catch of a lifetime, a wealthy man named Michael Farnsworth, whose charm radiated like gold. Little did she know, behind his polished façade lurked a scheme so twisted it would unravel her reality and leave her gasping for answers. The enigma surrounding Michael was orchestrated by a scorned, pregnant wife, hell-bent on punishing the mistress who had once destroyed her world. The stage was set for the perfect revenge, and Emily walked right into it. Emily Carter was no stranger to the allure of luxury. Growing up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Sacramento, she often entertained daydreams of mingling with high society. Sometimes she pictured herself stepping out of glossy, chauffeur-driven cars, dressed in designer clothes that shimmered under camera flashes. That daydream seemed so laughably far from her humble beginnings that she never truly believed it could happen. Yet, as she found herself brushing shoulders with wealthy acquaintances and sipping champagne at exclusive rooftop parties in downtown Los Angeles, she realized she had come a long way from her childhood home. Emily prided herself on her sharp instincts. She had transformed from a shy young girl into a sophisticated woman with a keen eye for style and opportunity. She worked as a public relations associate for a boutique marketing agency, rubbing elbows with budding celebrities and wealthy clients who insisted on having a certain image. Building connections came naturally to Emily. Her easy laugh, her sympathetic ear, and her unwavering confidence made her magnetically appealing. But behind the polished veneer of her success was a series of personal missteps. Most notable was her short-lived, discreet affair with Derek Armstrong, a charismatic entrepreneur who'd been married to the supremely elegant and newly pregnant Patricia Delgado Armstrong. Despite the adrenaline rush of stolen moments and secret rendezvous, Emily had ended the affair feeling unsatisfied, empty, and riddled with guilt that gnawed at her late at night. The day she decided to leave Derek was supposed to be a turning point. She promised herself she'd stop chasing illusions, that she'd build her own success without leaning on anyone else's checkbook. That vow, however, was short-lived. A part of her fostered by the adrenaline rush of living dangerously remained wide open to the wrong kind of attention. And as fate would have it, that attention seemed to find her again in the form of Michael Farnsworth. They crossed paths at a glitzy charity gala at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Emily, covering the event for her marketing agency, had been tasked with networking and gathering material for potential new clients. As she circulated with a glass of champagne in hand, she noticed a tall, handsome man lingering at the edge of the ballroom. He wore a tailored midnight blue suit, the color contrasting starkly with his crisp white shirt, and he exuded a commanding air of quiet confidence. Their eyes met. She felt a faint electric spark, something that was less about love at first sight and more about pure magnetism. When he introduced himself, his voice was smooth, with just a hint of a drawl. "Michael Farnsworth," he said, extending his hand in a graceful motion. "It's a pleasure." He had the kind of refined face that suggested old money, with impeccable grooming that rivaled the celebrities in attendance. Emily wasn't naive. Men like this usually came attached with complications, yet she couldn't help falling under his spell. He listened attentively as she talked about her job, about her boss Michelle Wang, and about the new marketing campaign they were launching for a high-end fitness resort in Malibu. His interest seemed genuine, and the way his gaze focused on her made her feel like she was the only one in the room. By the end of the night, Michael had slipped a sleek, embossed business card into her hand. "I'd love to talk more," he had said, flashing a smile that promised adventure. I have some projects in the works that could really use your PR expertise. Emily had never experienced such a direct blend of personal interest and business opportunity rolled into one. And so, she told herself her reasons for following up with him were purely professional. Deep down, however, she felt that same old stirring of excitement, the one she thought she had left behind when she broke things off with Derek. If she could combine her career aspirations with a dash of this captivating new connection, then perhaps, this time, she could have it all. She reached out the very next day, ignoring the faint warning bells in her head that told her to be cautious. Little did she know, Michael Farnsworth was not the man he appeared to be. And the trap that was carefully laid out for her was being orchestrated by someone she already knew all too well, the pregnant wife she had wronged in the past, Patricia Delgado Armstrong. 2 weeks flew by in a fever of private dinners and luxurious excursions. Michael arranged for the best tables at Los Angeles' trendiest restaurants, took Emily on helicopter rides over the city, and even teased her with the promise of traveling abroad together. Emily found her daily routine spinning in circles around the enigma that was Michael Farnsworth. "I'm out of town a lot," he would explain casually, while swirling a glass of expensive wine. "Business trips, family matters, philanthropic obligations. My name is on a handful of charity boards keeps me busy." Despite the sophisticated veneer, Michael always circled back to her, as though he needed Emily's presence to anchor him. She should have asked more questions. She should have wondered why a man of such apparent wealth and status was still single, or how he seemed to fit so seamlessly into her life, yet left behind so few traces of his own. Emily's friends offered varied opinions. Michelle Wang teased her about bagging a whale in the relationship department, while her roommate, Vanessa McCoy, probed for details Emily didn't have. "Has he ever introduced you to his family?" Vanessa asked one evening as Emily rummaged for a late-night snack. "Or have you seen where he actually lives?" "We haven't gotten that far," Emily deflected, trying not to let suspicion creep into her mind. It was easier to brush off Vanessa's questions than to admit she had none of the answers. Every time she tried to bring up personal details, Michael would pivot the conversation to lavish future plans trips, investments in Emily's career, possibly launching her own PR firm. The potential was dazzling, so it was easy to let those nagging worries slide. However, beneath Emily's excitement churned a simmering pool of guilt. Every so often she'd recall Derek Armstrong's face, his earnest eyes, the anxious smile he'd wear when they met in secrecy. She'd recall Patricia Delgado Armstrong, the poised wife with elegantly styled hair and a calm, soft-spoken manner that belied a fierce intelligence. She hated the memory of how she had trespassed into someone else's marriage, but the reality was she had done it, and no amount of denial would erase that fact. Sometimes Emily woke in the night, haunted by a recurring nightmare. In it, Patricia Armstrong stood at the foot of her bed, pregnant belly visible beneath a fitted dress. She would look down at Emily with an expression so sorrowful that Emily felt her heart tighten in her chest. Then Patricia would whisper, "Why?" But no matter how hard Emily tried, she could never articulate a response. As weeks went by, that guilt began to shape itself into rationalizations. She reminded herself that Derek had pursued her. He had been the one complaining about his lonely marriage and inattentive wife. He had never said Patricia was pregnant during their affair. Emily's own romantic illusions led her astray. Yes, but Derek's lies had stoked the flames. So maybe it wasn't entirely her fault. She tried to bury the guilt beneath the shimmer of possibility that Michael offered. Meanwhile, far from Emily's conscious awareness, Patricia Delgado Armstrong waited, watched, and laid out the final pieces of her vengeance. After discovering Derek's affair months earlier, Patricia had filed for legal separation, but kept the proceedings low-key. She had parted from him quietly, using her well-connected family attorneys to ensure minimal public drama. Derek, consumed by remorse and overshadowed by his own mistakes, had retreated from public view. Their unborn child would be raised solely by Patricia, if all went according to her plan. But she had other plans as well, plans that included making sure the woman who had betrayed her felt the full weight of destruction, not just fleeting regret. And Patricia was wealthy in her own right. Her father, Marcus Delgado, was a respected financier in New York, rumored to hold significant influences across multiple industries. With enough resources at her disposal, orchestrating a deception of epic proportions was entirely possible. All she needed was a man willing to play the part of Michael Farnsworth, a man who could insinuate himself into Emily's life and lead her down a path of heartbreak and ruin. The final act of betrayal would be deliciously poetic. Patricia thought once Emily Carter discovered the man she believed to be her golden ticket to happiness was nothing more than Patricia's puppet. "You'll love it," Michael said one Friday afternoon, calling Emily out of the blue. "I'm taking you to a private estate in Malibu for the weekend. Pack your bags. Think beach, open-air dinners, breezy nights. Trust me on this." She was sprawled on her couch, exhausted from a hectic work week, but the thought of a beachside getaway with him made her heart flutter. The two had seen each other only sporadically over the past week, largely due to Michael's alleged business commitments. "Is it your house?" Emily asked, her curiosity piqued. "It belongs to a family friend," Michael explained. "I have access for special occasions, and this weekend is certainly special." In a flurry of excitement, Emily quickly threw her chic beach outfits and a couple of evening dresses into a suitcase. She didn't question the arrangement much. She'd seen plenty of wealthy types with multiple properties or friends with luxurious estates. The invitation felt like one more step into Michael's world. The Malibu estate was grander than anything Emily had ever seen, a palatial, Mediterranean-style mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Manicured gardens lined a long driveway, and the sweeping view from the wraparound terrace seemed almost unreal. The weekend breezed by in a haze of indulgence. They spent their days lounging by an infinity pool, the sea glinting under the California sun, and their nights savoring candlelit dinners prepared by a private chef. But in between the idyllic moments, Emily noticed subtle inconsistencies in Michael's stories. On Saturday afternoon, he mentioned his father had passed away years ago, yet that evening he casually mentioned the annual family fishing trip planned for the upcoming summer. When Emily asked him to clarify, he simply waved it off, saying, "My father's best friend leads it these days. We still call it the family fishing trip. It's just tradition." While plausible, the explanation left Emily uneasy. He'd pivot to something else whenever she pressed about his family or business specifics. "It's complicated," he'd say. "I'll explain when the time is right." That night, as they lounged on the mansion's terrace, Emily thought about how seamlessly Michael fit into this glamorous setting. Yet, how little she truly knew about him. Her mind wandered back to Derek Armstrong. She remembered how easily he'd spun his own web of half-truths, how he'd curated his image to gain her sympathy. Was she blindly stumbling into another tangle of lies? "Michael," she ventured, summoning courage. Are you sure you're ready for a serious relationship? I mean, you have so much going on. And I've made mistakes in the past. I don't want to get tangled up in something I'll regret. I'd rather hear the truth now." He looked at her with unflinching eyes, then reached out to take her hand. "You, Emily Carter, are the truth I've been missing. When I'm ready, you'll know everything. For now, trust me." His words were more romantic lines than actual facts, but in her vulnerable state, she wanted to believe him. She wanted a happy ending, a chance to rise above her past mistakes. The hush of the ocean and the warmth of the night made everything feel possible. But far from Malibu's cliffs, Patricia Delgado Armstrong watched from the shadows, receiving updates through discreet channels. She had hired a private investigator to follow Emily from time to time, sending photographic evidence to confirm that Michael Farnsworth had successfully drawn Emily closer. Each new picture, Emily laughing in a garden, smiling on a beach, tightened the coil of Patricia's anger. Sometimes she felt an emotional tug for the unborn child she carried, worrying whether her thirst for revenge would overshadow her duties as a mother. But each time, the memory of Derek's betrayal reignited her resolve. The plan was in motion. There was no going back. Back in Los Angeles, Emily threw herself into a new series of PR campaigns. She juggled a fashion event with an up-and-coming designer, a tech startup launch, and a charity fundraiser for disadvantaged youth. She was determined to show her boss, Michelle Wang, that she was indispensable. If she worked hard enough, she thought, maybe she would earn that promotion, finally stepping out of the role of an associate into something more senior and making her own name in the industry. Michael floated in and out of her life unpredictably. He'd disappear for a few days, sometimes a week, then reappear with elaborate excuses, an emergency business trip, a philanthropic conference in Europe, a pressing family matter in the Hamptons. When Emily pressed for details, he flooded her with text messages and voice notes that sounded perfectly plausible, at least superficially. One evening, while she was finishing some last-minute tasks in her office, Emily's phone buzzed. It was Michael. "Hey, gorgeous," he greeted with his silky voice. "I'm thinking dinner at the Redwood Grill tonight. I've already secured the best table. Join me at 8. She almost declined, feeling drained, but the desire to see him overcame her exhaustion. "Yes," she replied. "I'll meet you there." The Redwood Grill was a high-end steakhouse, where getting a reservation often required weeks of notice. Michael had apparently secured a private booth near the wine cellar. As Emily arrived, he stood to greet her, exuding effortless grace in a tailored charcoal suit. Their conversation began with the usual pleasantries, but Emily's nerves were keyed up. She had spent the day wrestling with her own doubts. She was tired of waiting in limbo. Between sips of fine wine, she decided to bring it up again. "Michael," she said, carefully keeping her tone gentle, "we've been seeing each other for over a month now, but I still know so little about you. Can you blame me for being curious?" He reached across the table to hold her hand, his gaze locked onto hers. "Emily," he said, "I understand your concern. I want to open up to you, but my world is complicated. My family, they're extremely private people. Old money families have traditions, structures, and I'm beholden to them. It's not just about me, it's about preserving a legacy." That explanation felt more like an evasion than an answer, but she nodded, trying to be respectful of his boundaries. The two of them finished dinner in a subdued mood. Michael offered to drive her home, and despite her hesitation, she agreed, hoping to salvage a sense of closeness. In the car, he rested his hand on hers while navigating the Los Angeles streets. "Don't give up on me yet," he said, a trace of vulnerability appearing in his voice. "I'll show you what I can when the time is right." Emily allowed herself to be comforted by that promise, though the small voice of doubt in her head refused to be silenced. It only grew louder later that night, when she returned to her apartment and found a letter slipped under her door. The envelope bore no return address, just her name in neat handwriting. Inside was a single photograph, Emily herself, stepping into Derek Armstrong's car. Months ago, her face partially visible. On the back of the photo, in a scribbled message, were the words, "Remember." Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the image. The memories came flooding back hot, guilty and disorienting. Who would send this? And why? Could it be Derek trying to rekindle something? Or was someone else out there, reminding her that her past sins weren't so easily erased. She felt her stomach twist as she realized that someone had been watching. Someone new. She stayed awake that night, tossing and turning, unable to shake the sense of impending doom. Days turned into an anxious waiting game. Emily kept watch for more mysterious letters, but none arrived. She debated calling Derek directly to ask if he was behind it, but the thought of hearing his voice again, after all this time, made her stomach churn with equal parts longing and revulsion. Meanwhile, Michael's behavior started to change. Though still attentive in his messages, he seemed more guarded whenever they were together. Emily couldn't help but notice how he often checked his phone, as though expecting some urgent news or instructions. She chalked it up to the high stakes of his so-called family business, but a nagging sense of suspicion lingered. In the midst of it all, Emily's career surged forward. Michelle Wang informed her she had secured a key interview with Natalie Jones, a prominent Hollywood actress who was launching a new line of sustainable skincare products. Conducting this interview could be Emily's shot at a major promotion. The day before the interview, she holed up in her apartment, refining her questions and double-checking her research. Halfway through the evening, her phone buzzed again. A private number. She answered, heart thudding. A woman's voice, calm and cool, greeted her. "Hello, Emily." She froze. The voice was faintly familiar. "Yes." "Who is this? My name isn't important right now," the voice replied, "but I think you know who I am. I'm calling to remind you of the promises we make to ourselves, that we'll never hurt someone else that deeply again." Emily's heart hammered. She could almost picture Patricia Delgado Armstrong on the other end, her regal composure in place. She tried to maintain her own composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to yourself," the voice said. "You've moved on to someone new, haven't you? Another wealthy man? I do hope you're being careful this time." Emily felt a wave of heat flood her. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this is harassment. If you keep contacting me—" The line went dead. Shaken, Emily redialed, but the number was blocked. She sank onto her couch, hugging a throw pillow. Was it Patricia? It had to be. But how did she get her number? And what could she possibly want after all these months? She tried to call Michael, hoping to anchor herself in his steady presence. No answer. With trembling hands, she sent him a text, but he didn't respond. She felt alone, cornered by invisible threats from her past and uncertain illusions of her present. Unbeknownst to Emily, this was precisely the effect Patricia desired. Patricia had grown adept at intimidation in her quest to make Emily's life unravel. It was almost too easy. One well-placed photograph, one cryptic phone call, and the fear had metastasized. But Patricia's plan hinged on the grand reveal she had set in motion. She would let Emily believe that a shadow from her past was dogging her steps, while the real betrayal, Michael Farnsworth's true identity and purpose, simmered just beneath the surface. Patricia watched and waited, her pregnant belly growing with each week, her resolve hardening with each passing day. The next morning, Emily fought her nerves to conduct the interview with Natalie Jones. Despite her private turmoil, she managed to maintain a professional veneer. Her questions were well-researched, and Natalie, in turn, was gracious and effusive in her responses. By the end, Emily felt a surge of pride. Maybe she could balance the chaos in her personal life with the ambition in her professional one. Maybe she could still thrive despite her past mistakes. Feeling emboldened, she texted Michael. This time, he answered almost immediately. "Hey, sorry I missed your call last night," he said. "Business. Let's celebrate your interview success, though. Dinner at my place tonight." This was the first time he'd ever invited her to his place, and her curiosity piqued. "Yes," she replied, excitement overshadowing her lingering doubts. That evening, she found herself navigating through a lavish, gated community in Bel Air. A uniformed guard waved her through after checking a list. Emily's heart pounded as she followed winding roads lined with towering palm trees and manicured hedges. When she finally arrived, the house in question was breathtaking, a modern, glass-walled villa that overlooked the city lights. She felt a swirl of emotions, awe, excitement, and a flicker of disbelief. Michael greeted her at the door, wearing a relaxed linen shirt and slacks. The interior of the house was even more impressive, filled with contemporary art pieces and minimalistic furniture that whispered discreet luxury. The dinner table, set with tall candles and polished silverware, awaited them. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Michael, this is stunning! Honestly, I'm speechless." He grinned, motioning for her to follow him to the open kitchen. "I'm glad you like it. Let's say this is one of the places I can truly call home." The corners of her mind itched with skepticism. He had called the Malibu mansion a friend's estate, and this was apparently one of his homes. Was he really that rich, or just a consummate showman? Yet, the affectionate look in his eyes made her question her own doubts. Perhaps she was overthinking. They enjoyed a sumptuous meal steak, so tender it practically melted, fresh vegetables drizzled with gourmet sauces, and a bottle of vintage red wine that Michael claimed came from his personal cellar. Emily felt the tension in her body ease. Here was the exclusivity she had once dreamed of. Here was a man who made her feel seen, cherished, and, perhaps most importantly, hopeful. After dinner, they curled up on a sleek leather couch in the living room. Michael put an arm around her and said, "I'm throwing a little cocktail party next week. Some close friends, a few business associates. I'd love for you to be there." Her stomach fluttered. A party in his world, whatever that truly was. "I'd be honored," she said. He kissed her softly, and for a moment, the entire twisted network of fear, guilt, and suspicion receded into a blur of contentment. But as she drove home that night, her phone buzzed again, a text message from an unknown number containing a simple statement, "Nothing stays hidden forever." Emily nearly dropped the phone. She glanced around in the darkness as she pulled to a stop at a red light. Her heart thumped wildly. She felt watched, stalked, as though someone lurked in every shadow, and, in a way, she was right. Patricia's network was wide and deep, watching Emily's every move, waiting for the right moment to close the net. The following week crawled by. Emily was a bundle of nerves. If the phone calls, mysterious texts, and haunting photographs were designed to rattle her, they were succeeding. Yet, she clung to the promise of Michael's cocktail party as a lifeline, a chance to finally see more of his inner circle. The evening arrived, and Emily took extra care, choosing her outfit, an elegant black cocktail dress that accentuated her figure without being overtly flashy. She pinned her hair in a loose updo and completed the look with subtle diamond stud earrings. She wanted to look the part of a sophisticated companion to a man of Michael's stature. When she arrived at Michael's Bel Air villa, the air hummed with energy. Elegantly dressed guests mingled, sipping cocktails that glistened in crystal glasses. Waiters in crisp uniforms passed through the crowd, offering delicacies on silver platters. Soft jazz music floated from speakers hidden amidst tall potted plants. For a moment, Emily felt like she had stepped onto the set of a glamorous Hollywood movie. Michael spotted her from across the room and immediately broke away from a group of men engaged in animated conversation. He made his way to her side, placing a light hand on her waist. "You look radiant," he whispered. She smiled, her pulse quickening. "Thank you for inviting me." As Emily mingled, she sensed a certain forced quality to the conversation. People smiled politely, but asked vague, superficial questions, almost as though they were reciting lines for an unseen camera. It was enough to raise her internal alarm bells, but she pushed that feeling aside. This was, after all, high society, a world where formality often replaced genuine warmth. Midway through the party, Michael pulled her aside into a quiet corner by the large panoramic windows. The city spread out before them in a blanket of lights. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket and retrieving a small velvet box. Emily's eyes widened. She flipped it open to reveal a delicate gold bracelet studded with tiny diamonds. It was breathtaking. "Oh, Michael, it's beautiful." He slipped it onto her wrist. "A token of my appreciation for your patience, for your trust." Her eyes misted with gratitude. She glanced around, suddenly aware that several guests seemed to be watching them. But as soon as she looked, they turned away, feigning casual conversation. The moment felt oddly staged. Then Michael's phone buzzed, and he excused himself to take the call. Left alone, Emily found herself strangely uncomfortable. She looked down at the bracelet, admiring its sparkle. A swirl of conflicting emotions washed over her: happiness at being included in his life, fear at the unknown threats lurking in her past, and a nagging sense that something was off about this entire scenario. That's when she spotted a woman in a far corner of the room, wearing a simple champagne-colored dress that contrasted with the more flamboyant ensembles around her. This woman's face was partially turned away, but something about her posture and the elegant drape of her dress struck Emily as familiar. She took a step closer, heart pounding. Suddenly, the woman turned. For a split second, Emily believed she was looking at Patricia Delgado Armstrong. The same refined features, the same piercing eyes. Emily's stomach twisted in dread. But then a cluster of guests moved between them, blocking her line of sight, and when they cleared, the woman was gone. Emily tried to calm her nerves, telling herself it had to be her imagination. Patricia was a ghost of her past. Why would she be at Michael's party? But the uneasy feeling refused to subside, building steadily until she felt like she might choke on it. She wanted to pull Michael aside and ask him to confirm who that woman was. But he was across the room, still engrossed in his phone call. The conversation around her swirled like white noise. She realized suddenly that no one had introduced themselves with last names, just first names. No mention of how they knew Michael or what they did professionally. It was like a carefully orchestrated stage performance. She was the only one left in the dark, playing a role she didn't fully understand. A wave of claustrophobia swept over her, and she slipped out the sliding glass doors onto the balcony for fresh air. From there, she could see inside, observe the movements of the guests like actors in a play she hadn't been given the script for. She stared at the panoramic view of Los Angeles, the city of dreams and illusions. And in that moment, she realized she might be caught in an elaborate illusion of her own. In the days following Michael's party, Emily felt a restlessness that refused to go away. Everything about the event, the wooden conversations, the curious stares, refused to settle in her mind. She was determined to get answers, even if it meant crossing boundaries. One afternoon, she took it upon herself to run a background check on Michael Farnsworth. Using an online service known to deep dive into public records, she typed in his full name along with other details. Frustratingly, the results were inconclusive. There were Farnsworths scattered across the country, but none matching the age or description of Michael Farnsworth from Bel-Air. No massive business holdings, no philanthropic organizations registered under his name. It was as though he existed only in her world, not in the real world. Unease gnawed at her. Who was he, really? She tried confronting him with her discoveries, but he brushed it off with exasperating charm. "Emily, I told you, my family invests in shell corporations and trusts. We keep a low profile. We're not plastered on the front page of Forbes," he insisted, concluding with that smile that usually made her doubts fade. Usually, but not this time. At last, her frustration pushed her to contact a friend who worked at a private investigations firm, Noah Johnson, an old college acquaintance. He specialized in digital forensics and could sometimes look up details not readily available to the public. She only shared the basics, that she was worried about the authenticity of someone's identity and needed to confirm certain details. She omitted the more personal aspects, though she suspected Noah understood this was about a romantic entanglement. A few days later, Noah returned her call. "Emily," he said, his voice tight with concern, "I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but this guy is nearly a ghost." The name Michael Farnsworth is basically an empty shell. A new phone plan registered under that name opened only a month before you first met him. The Bel Air property is owned by a holding company that traces back to Delgado Enterprises. Does that name ring a bell? Emily's blood ran cold. Delgado, the same surname as Patricia Delgado Armstrong. Her mind spun. Could it be that Patricia somehow owned the Bel Air villa? Or was it a coincidence? Noah continued. Whoever set this up covered their tracks well. But you asked me to keep digging, and that's the main lead I have. Delgado Enterprises is run by Marcus Delgado in New York. He's got a daughter named Patricia. Emily, if you're entangled with these people, be careful. They've got a lot of power. She ended the call, her hands shaking. It felt as though the ground beneath her had crumbled. All the puzzle pieces flew at her in dizzying patterns. Patricia's phone calls, the suspicious party, the photograph from her affair with Derek. The horrifying realization that Michael Farnsworth could be a puppet in Patricia's scheme slammed into her. Emily thought back to the woman she believed she'd spotted at Michael's cocktail party. It had to be Patricia. Somehow, Patricia was behind Michael Farnsworth. The question was why. Revenge, obviously. But how deep did the conspiracy go, and how was Emily to extricate herself without further damage? Dread coiled in Emily's chest as she rushed to Michael's Bel Air villa that evening, determined to confront him. She hammered on the massive front door, only to be greeted by a startled housekeeper who claimed Michael was away on business. Emily brushed past her, scanning the opulent living room, the lounge area, the polished floors that glinted under recessed lighting. Everything looked staged, almost like a show home devoid of personal touch. Frantic, she checked the master bedroom but found it locked. She jiggled the handle until, in her desperation, she located a spare key in a nearby drawer. Pushing the door open, she expected to find a private sanctuary that confirmed Michael's authenticity, maybe a closet full of his clothes, personal mementos, photographs. Instead, she found an oddly barren space, a king-sized bed, neatly made, with no sign of a personal life. The walk-in closet contained a small selection of men's suits and shirts, all brand new with the tags removed. No old T-shirts, no worn-out sneakers, nothing that indicated a real occupant lived here. Her eyes landed on a small writing desk tucked in a corner. She rifled through drawers, searching for mail, documents, anything. Tucked at the bottom of one drawer, she discovered a plain folder. Inside were photos of her, some from months ago, during the Derek affair, others from more recently. Stepping into Michael's car, dining with him, smiling at him as though he were her entire world. The final photo was the worst of all. It was from that very morning, snapped as she left her apartment. Someone had been following her daily. She swayed on her feet, as though punched in the gut. This whole relationship was a lie, orchestrated for the sole purpose of humiliating her, punishing her. Patricia was behind it, there was no doubt now. Rage, embarrassment, and sorrow battled within her as she slammed the folder shut. She fled the house, her mind in a fog. She left frantic voicemails on Michael's phone, demanding he meet her. She texted him too, "I know everything. You'd better have a damn good explanation." Hours passed with no response. With trembling hands, she drove in circles, only dimly aware of traffic lights and honking cars. By the time she realized the danger of her emotional state, she was parked near the ocean in Santa Monica, the sky darkening over turbulent waves. Ping, her phone finally buzzed. A text from Michael: "Meet me at the Santa Monica Pier, 10 p.m., the West End, where the Ferris wheel is. We can talk." Despite the sense of menace, Emily forced herself to go. She arrived at the pier, the neon lights of carnival rides reflecting off the water. Crowds of tourists still wandered around, munching funnel cakes and riding the carousel. She felt out of place in her disheveled cocktail attire from earlier, but she pushed forward. At exactly 10, Michael appeared. His expression was unreadable under the colorful lights. Emily wasted no time. She marched up to him, face flushed with anger. "Who are you?" she demanded, holding back tears. "Who really are you?" he sighed, looking genuinely torn. I'm sorry, Emily. You don't understand. What's there to understand?" She hurled the words at him. "I found the photos. I know about Delgado Enterprises. Is this about Patricia? Are you working for her?" A tortured expression crossed his face. He reached for her hand, but she jerked away. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, voice breaking. "It started as a job. He nodded miserably. "Patricia hired me. I'm an actor, okay? I do small roles, commercials. I needed money. She approached me with this unbelievably lucrative proposition. I didn't ask too many questions. She told me you were a dangerous gold digger who'd ruined her marriage. All I had to do was lure you in, make you believe I was wealthy, and see how far you'd go. She wanted you humiliated, financially broken, if possible. She had a whole plan. But..." He trailed off, tears edging his eyes. "I fell for you, Emily. It's real now. My feelings are real." She felt like the pier beneath her feet was tilting. Anger surged hot in her veins. "Your feelings," she spat. "Everything's been a lie. You used me, manipulated me, all for money." "I know," he said, voice quivering, "but I'm trying to fix it. I was going to tell you tonight, if you hadn't found out." Emily's laughter was laced with bitterness. "Tell me what, exactly? That the entire last few weeks were just a role you've been playing? That your entire life story is fake?" He nodded, eyes full of shame. "Yes, but Emily, I want to help you. We can expose Patricia's plan. She's planning something big, some final move to ruin you. I can sabotage it." She stood there, breath ragged, trying to process. A wave of heartbreak hit her, along with an undercurrent of terror. Patricia was still out there, pregnant and plotting. And this man, this supposed knight in shining armor, was actually the hired weapon aimed directly at her. Her world had cracked into fragments. "I don't trust you," Emily hissed. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was steady. "Leave me alone." She turned and fled, weaving through the startled throngs of tourists, ignoring Michael's pleas behind her. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, where she collapsed, sobbing. Betrayal stung with a ferocity she'd never known before. She had to confront Patricia. She had to end this madness before Patricia's final blow landed. Emily wasn't sure how she managed to arrange a meeting with Patricia. It started with a single text message to the private number that had called her weeks ago. "I know everything," she wrote. "If you want to settle this, meet me at the Redwood Grill tomorrow at 2 p.m. No games. If you don't show up, I'll go public with what I know." She didn't expect a response. But a simple "confirmed" came an hour later. The next day, Emily entered the Redwood Grill, ironically the same upscale steakhouse where she and Michael had shared an evening that felt like a lifetime ago. The manager, recognizing her from her earlier visits, escorted her to a private booth in a hushed corner. Emily had asked for discretion. A few minutes later, Patricia Delgado Armstrong walked in, and Emily felt a chill skate down her spine. Patricia was glowing, a pregnant goddess in a sleek black dress that showcased her belly. Her hair was pinned in a neat chignon, and her posture radiated confidence. She moved like a woman in control of everything around her. Patricia settled across from Emily, letting a heavy silence stretch. Finally she spoke, her voice smooth and cold. "You wanted this meeting, so talk." Emily forced herself not to shrink under Patricia's gaze. She thought of all the ways to begin, but anger overtook her. "You hired an actor to pose as Michael Farnsworth. You had him seduce me. Why?" Patricia raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sardonic smile. "Because you took something from me, Emily. You thought you'd get away with it. You wrecked my marriage, you humiliated me, and now you expect me to just move on?" Emily's temper flared. "I ended it with Derek before I even knew you were pregnant. He told me the two of you were basically strangers living in the same house. I never intended stop." Patricia's voice cut like a blade. "You knew he was married. Don't feign ignorance now. Did you ever stop to wonder about the wife in the picture? Or did you just enjoy the thrill of sleeping with a wealthy man?" Emily sucked in a breath, guilt and rage clashing. "Fine, I made a mistake. But this revenge scheme? It's unhinged." Patricia leaned forward, her eyes like steel. "You have no idea what you cost me. My baby will be born into a broken home. Derek is a shell of himself because of the guilt. My family name dragged through the mud. And you waltzed away scot-free, didn't you? I wanted you to feel the sting of heartbreak and betrayal. I wanted you to crave something you couldn't have, only to watch it all vanish." Emily's eyes burned. "Well, you succeeded. You used me like a pawn in your twisted play. I found the photos. I found out the Bel Air house is owned by Delgado Enterprises. Congratulations on your cunning." Patricia seemed unruffled. "I thought it was fitting. Derek hurt me with illusions. I returned the favor by offering you illusions of grandeur. And guess what? You fell for them hook, line, and sinker." Emily closed her eyes, steadying herself. She couldn't let Patricia see how deeply the blade had cut. "So, what's next?" she asked quietly. "Are you satisfied now?" Patricia's voice softened, but it was no less dangerous. "Almost. There's one last piece. I want you to disappear. Leave Los Angeles. Start over somewhere far away. Never come near Derek or me again. If you refuse, I have a full media dossier of your affair, your text messages, your pictures with Michael Farnsworth. I can bury your career. I can ensure every job, every friend, every social circle sees you as the manipulative mistress you are." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. She had worked so hard to build her career. Her entire identity in the city would be obliterated. Patricia continued, "I'll give you a week to pack up. After that, I start making calls. Trust me, I have the connections to do irreparable damage." A wave of panic and helplessness threatened to drown Emily. She stared at Patricia, speechless. This was a brand of revenge she had never anticipated, cruel, methodical, and devastating. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Why not just release it now? Why warn me?" Patricia pursed her lips, measuring her words. "Because I want you to feel exactly what I felt when you intruded into my marriage, the dread, the inevitability. I want you to consider every day you have left as a countdown to the ruin of everything you've built. And maybe, just maybe, I'd like you to reflect on how easily you believed Michael's lies. Perhaps it'll make you a better person someday." With that, Patricia rose from her seat, her posture regal despite her advanced pregnancy. She left Emily sitting there, a trembling figure in a storm of shame and fear. When Emily emerged from the redwood grill, she could hardly breathe. Patricia's ultimatum echoed in her mind, "Leave, or I'll ruin you." She considered the possibility of fighting back, of using her PR connections to spin a story. But how could she compete with Patricia Delgado Armstrong, backed by her wealthy family and unlimited resources? She called Michael, if that was even his real name, and demanded an urgent meeting. He showed up at her apartment looking disheveled, his facade of wealth and confidence gone. He wore a simple T-shirt and jeans, revealing the struggling actor beneath the polished veneer. Emily's heartbreak resurfaced at the sight of him. "I met Patricia," she said the moment he stepped inside. "She wants me gone, or she'll destroy my life." Michael's face fell. I guessed as much. "Listen, you don't have to run. Let me help you. We can reveal everything, tell the press that Patricia orchestrated this entire thing. People love a scandal, especially when the wealthy are behind it. It might protect you." Emily shook her head. "Who's going to believe me? I'm the ex-mistress. She's the pregnant, wronged wife. She has all the evidence, plus the money to spin it however she wants. And even if I tried, her father's influence alone could blackball me from my career." Michael reached for her, eyes desperate. "You can't just give up. I'll come forward, explain that I was hired. We'll show the contract she made me sign." Emily pressed a shaking hand to her forehead. "You have a contract?" she asked in disbelief. He nodded, ashamed. "Yes, but she's cunning. The contract states that she was producing a film concept, and I was acting in a reality show type scenario. It's couched in legal jargon, so it might not be as damaging as you think." "She's thorough, Emily." She sank onto the couch. "My God, she's covered every angle." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Through tears, Emily forced herself to see the only path left that didn't lead to more devastation. "I'll leave," she whispered. "I'll give up everything and go somewhere else." Michael's expression crumbled. "No, please. We can fight this. I'll stand by you." She laughed bitterly through her tears. "Stand by me? You're part of this. Every memory we have is tainted. God, I don't even know if I can trust anything you say now." He bowed his head, silent. He didn't defend himself because he knew she was right. "I need to do what's best for me now," Emily continued, voice trembling but resolute. "I won't let Patricia annihilate me publicly. At least, if I leave quietly, I can start over somewhere else with a fresh slate." Michael's eyes were wet. "What if I come with you?" She shook her head, her tears blurring the room. "I can't even look at you without remembering every lie. You need to fix your own mess." He sank back, as though struck by a blow he'd long deserved. "I understand." They parted that night without another word, the hush of finality weighing heavy on both of them. Over the next days, Emily packed her belongings into boxes and suitcases. She found a small place in another city, Phoenix, Arizona, far enough away to escape the orbit of Patricia Delgado Armstrong's power. She broke her lease in Los Angeles, quietly resigned from her job at the agency, and dodged every question from Michelle Wang and Vanessa McCoy about her abrupt departure. She told them she had received an out-of-state job offer, forging a half-truth to shield them from the scandal. The morning she loaded the last of her boxes into a moving truck, she took one final look at the city skyline, this place she had loved so fiercely, the place she had hoped to conquer and call her own. Instead, it had become the battleground where she lost more than she ever imagined. As she was about to step into the driver's seat, a voice called out behind her, breathless and urgent. She turned to see Michael, or whatever his real name was, running up to her. He appeared harried, as though he had dashed across half the city to catch her. "What are you doing here?" she asked, keeping her tone guarded. "I had to give you something," he said, pressing a sealed envelope into her hands. "It's all the money Patricia paid me, plus the legal documents and phone messages that prove this was her scheme. I made duplicates. You can use them if you ever need to defend yourself, or you can choose to destroy them. It's up to you." She stared at him, conflicted emotions playing across her face. "Why are you giving me this now?" He swallowed hard, tears filling his eyes. "Because I genuinely fell in love with you. And even though you don't trust me anymore, I can't let you leave without at least giving you a chance to fight back if you ever choose to. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry." She took the envelope, her fingers trembling, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. She could see regret etched into every line of his face. Her anger toward him was still a raw wound, but a small part of her recognized a shattered man who had made the worst choices, only to realize too late what it cost. "I'll decide what to do with this," she said quietly, clinging to her last shred of composure. "Take care, Michael, or whatever your name is." He tried to manage a smile, but his tears spilled over. Without another word, Emily climbed into the truck and drove away, leaving behind a city of broken promises. In the weeks that followed, Patricia Delgado Armstrong prepared for the birth of her child, satisfied that Emily Carter was gone from Los Angeles. But in the hush of one late evening, she received a single, anonymous package. Inside was a signed confession from a certain Michael Farnsworth, real name Ryan Porter, detailing the entire revenge scheme, along with photo evidence and screenshots of text messages planning Emily's entrapment. At the bottom was a single note: "I'm not seeking revenge. I just wanted you to know I could have destroyed you, just as you threatened to destroy me. But I won't do it. Unlike you, I know mercy." Patricia's hands shook with fury. Her eyes burned with the realization that the final say in this twisted tale belonged not to her, but to the woman she had underestimated. Emily Carter had walked away, but not without a silent warning: "I may forgive, but I won't forget." Such was the pregnant wife's perfect revenge, and the mistress's final act of unexpected grace. In the end, Emily Carter paid the price for her mistakes, but she also discovered her own strength. Patricia Delgado Armstrong exacted a brutal, cunning revenge, yet she underestimated the power of a conscience awakened by love. In a parting twist, Emily ensured Patricia knew she wasn't the only one capable of wielding truth as a weapon. It's a story of betrayal and regret, but also of resilience and redemption. If you've been captivated by this dramatic tale of secrets, double crosses, and shattered illusions, remember there's always more to a story than meets the eye. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster, and for witnessing how revenge can sometimes reveal what lies deep within our hearts. Before you go, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories that delve into the dark and light sides of human nature. We'll see you in the next dramatic installment.